I'm honored to introduce Angie Kim to all of you. Angie is a writer and a novelist. She attended Stanford University and Harvard Law School, where she was an editor of the Harvard Law Review. Her work has appeared in many publications, including Slate, Vogue, and the New York Times. This evening, she is going to talk about her debut novel, Miracle Creek. The novel, set in a rural Virginia town called Miracle Creek, centers on a couple running an experimental medical device called the Miracle Submarine that mysteriously explodes, killing two people. The ensuing murder trial creates a maelstrom of drama that upends the entire community, unearthing buried secrets and creating intense rivalries and tenuous alliances. Publishers Weekly, in their review of the novel, calls it a masterfully plotted novel about the joys and pains of motherhood, the trick mirror nature of truth, and the unforgiving nature of justice. Angie will be in conversation with her publisher, Sarah Crichton, and literary agent, Susan Golomb. Sarah launched Sarah Crichton Books, an imprint of FSG, almost 15 years ago. Among the imprint's many successes have been Ismail Bey's A Long Way Gone and Matthew Quick's Silver Linings Playbook. Before FSG, she was the publisher of Little Brown, where she published Malcolm Gladwell and David Foster Wallace, among others. And Susan Golomb has been an agent of literary fiction and nonfiction for over 30 years, both with her own agency and now with Writers House. In addition to Angie Kim, she represents a long list of award winning and best selling authors, including Jonathan Franzen, William T. Volman, and Rachel Kushner. Everyone, let us all give them a warm welcome.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I don't think this is on. Yeah? Okay. I'm Susan Gollum. I'm Angie's literary agent, and I want to thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful day to bookstore. And I want to introduce Angie, and I'll talk a little bit about how her book came out into the world, and then Angie and Sarah, her editor, will talk a little. I get maybe 30 queries a day from people who have a novel or a nonfiction book and want to be published. And apparently, Angie's came in when was it? It was September of 2016. And it sat around in my office until an intern read the manuscript and said, "You have to read this." And I was on my way to a writers' conference in Hawaii. Well, no, I had pneumonia. I forgot about this. I had pneumonia. And I was trying to sell a book in time for a fair, and between hospital visits and coughing, and I just could not get to this novel that my intern was saying was remarkable. And then Angie got an offer, and I told her that I couldn't read it for a while, but that I promised I would read it on the plane to Hawaii, where I was going for a writers' conference. And when I landed, I called Angie and told her how much I loved it and wanted to represent her. And then Angie told me, well, she had even more offers from other agents. And, would I meet with her, in November when I came back? And I was like, of course. And, we call these beauty contests in the industry, and we all have to compete with other agents and try and sign the author. But I was very fortunate that Angie did choose me in the end. And I also wanted to say that when I get something in, I just read it. I don't Google the author, because I started in this business long before there was a Google to Google. And invariably, if I like a manuscript, there is someone really lovely on the other end of the phone. And in Angie's case, I did not know that she had been a Stanford undergrad, Harvard Law School grad, editor of the Harvard Law Review, that she was a lawyer at Williams and Connolly, that she then was a McKinsey consultant, and then what else? It just goes on and on, and I'm every day gobsmacked by how lovely and talented Angie is. And it seems like everybody else is, because the book has only been out for a week, and it is already a Washington Post bestseller, a Barnes & Noble bestseller. It's an Amazon pick for the 5 best novels of the spring, a Book of the Month Club selection, a May Indie Next pick, Apple Books Top 10 Debuts of 2019, Time Magazine, People Magazine, and Entertainment Weekly, Elle and Real Simple have all picked it as its best books. And when you buy a copy, you'll find out why. So without further ado, over to you two.
It's not very often that you have both the agent and the editor and publisher show up to support a book, but we love this book. And if you go on Goodreads and Amazon and start reading what other people are saying about it, you'll see that we're not alone. And when Susan says that, so it is this amazing thing when you have a first novelist show up and somebody sort of submits it to you. And people often ask me as an editor, how do I decide to sign up a book? Really, it comes down to two things: the beginning of a book and the end of a book. And when you pick up a manuscript, it's either going to grab you right away or it's not. And if it's not going to grab me right away, it's not going to grab a lot of other people right away. And so I thought that what we could start right now is by having Angie read from the start of the book, to give you a taste of what it was that Susan went through and I went through when we picked up this manuscript by this unknown writer. So.
Okay, I'll do that. But first of all, I just want to say hi to everyone. And I told my agent and my editor, all my friends are late. There's no way that they're going to be expecting this event to be starting on time. And sure enough, and then my husband and kids and my parents just arrived because they got into a fender bender with a woman who wouldn't let them leave. So they're very stressed. So let's everybody take a deep breath. I'm so happy that they're here. Okay, yay, woohoo. Okay. So this is from the beginning of the book. The incident: Miracle Creek, Virginia, Tuesday, August 26, 2008. My husband asked me to lie. Not a big lie. He probably didn't even consider it a lie, and neither did I at first. It was such a small thing what he wanted. The police had just released the protesters, and while he stepped out to make sure they weren't coming back, I was to sit in his chair. Cover for him, the way coworkers do as a matter of course, the way we ourselves used to at the grocery store while I ate or he smoked. But as I took his seat, I bumped against the desk, and the certificate above it went slightly crooked, as if to remind me that this wasn't a regular business, that there was a reason he'd never left me in charge before. Pak reached over me to straighten the frame, his eyes on the English lettering. Pak Yoo, Miracle Submarine, LLC, Certified Hyperbaric Technician. He said, "I still on the certificate," as if talking to it, not to me. "Everything's done. The patients are sealed in. The oxygen's on. You just have to sit here." He looked at me. That's it. I looked over the controls, the unfamiliar knobs and switches for the chamber we'd painted baby blue and placed in this barn just last month. "What if the patients buzz me?" I said. I'll say you'll be right back, but no, they can't know I'm gone. If anyone asks, I'm here. I've been here the whole time. "But if something goes wrong," and "What could go wrong?" Pak said, his voice forceful like a command. "I'll be right back and they won't buzz you. Nothing will happen." He walked away as if that was the end of the matter. But at the doorway, he looked back at me. "Nothing will happen," he said again, softer. It sounded like a plea. As soon as the barn door banged shut, I wanted to scream that he was crazy to expect nothing to go wrong on this day, of all days, when so much had gone wrong. The protesters, their sabotage plan, the resulting power outage, the police. Did he think so much had already happened that nothing more could? But life doesn't work like that. Tragedies don't inoculate you against further tragedies, and misfortune doesn't get sprinkled out in fair proportions. Bad things get hurled at you in clumps and batches, unmanageable and messy. How could he not know that after everything we'd been through?
So you can see in that opening that there's a master storyteller at work. You've got a lie, you've got secrets, you've got the intimation that something's going to go not just wrong but terribly wrong. You've got the understanding that that this is an immigrant couple, and there's a strange thing called an H-bot, which I'll ask Angie to explain in a minute. You can see that it's a family situation. You can see that there is tension. There's mention of protesters. There's the police, and all of it told. It's not one of those situations where you're being bopped over the head. You're getting sucked immediately into a story, and the story keeps going from there. And it's a complicated story, and it's not easy to sort of reduce to a couple of sentences. But Angie, you've been being forced to sort of reduce this complicated story. So why don't you tell people more about it?
Sure. So, in a nutshell, Miracle Creek is a literary courtroom drama about a Korean immigrant family and a young single mother who's on trial for murdering her 8-year-old son on the autism spectrum. And Miracle Creek is the name of a fictional Virginia town, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And the Yoo family settle there, and they have something called Miracle Submarine, which is not a real submarine. It's a hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, or HBOT. And what that is it's a real thing. It's hospitals use it for conventional therapies for things like burns and carbon monoxide poisoning, gangrene, things like that. But especially recently, people have been using it as an experimental therapy for things ranging from Lyme disease and infertility to cerebral palsy and autism. And so, oh my God, I just saw my friend's T-shirt that says Miracle Creek on it. Okay, sorry. But anyway, so what was I saying? Oh, HBOT. Okay. So what happens in the beginning of this novel is that a group of patients are sealed inside this HBOT chamber, and somebody deliberately sets fire by the oxygen tanks outside, which causes an explosion and creating this uncontrollable fire, and people die. And then there's a murder trial. So in one sense, the book is a whodunit / howdunit / whydunit. You are reading to figure out who set the fire and how did they set the fire in a way that's consistent with what everybody is telling you. So not just figuring out who, but like how does it all fit together? And then the why done it, like why would anybody do this? And we, as the readers, become the jurors along with the real jurors, well, fictional jurors in the story, and we try to figure that out. But I hope that it's a little more than that, and that it's an excuse in a way to take a deep dive into the lives of two groups of people. One is the immigrant family, especially in a rural setting where they are so isolated and so desperately longing for connection. And then another group of characters who are longing for connection in the same way, which is the parents of the special needs children and children with chronic medical issues, and sort of a depiction of how we are all trying to sort of get by and are desperate and longing for a connection, and also sacrificing everything for the children as well.
Right. And you have drawn a lot from your own life and sort of woven it into the book. It's not autobiographical in any way, but clearly you've taken many different facets of your life, and starting with the immigrant story. And one of the main characters, it's not just the couple who appear in the beginning of the book, but they have a teenage daughter, Mary, who is a wonderful character because she's trying to assimilate, but she's also rejecting certain parts of the culture. And she's got a foot in both worlds. And you came here with your parents from Seoul when you were 11 and moved to Baltimore. And that must have been quite a tough transition for you. Maybe you can talk about that some.
So I came. We came to America, and I'm the only child with my parents who are here in the front. And we came to Baltimore, and it was really hard because, in one sense, it was like a dream come true. Because in Korea, we were really poor, and so we lived in one room, all three of us. And, we didn't have running water, we didn't have indoor plumbing. And we went from that environment to one in which living with my aunt and uncle in outside Baltimore in Lutherville, Maryland, here was this house with multiple bedrooms, with multiple bathrooms inside the house, with indoor plumbing, which was miraculous, and a stove that was an indoor stove, all sorts of things. So in one sense, it was a dream come true. But in another sense, the sense of going from a place of intimacy with my parents where we were in the same room and we, were together every day, to one in which they actually had to live in the grocery store that they ran because their hours were so long and it was such a dangerous neighborhood that they sort of slept in the back of the store while I stayed with my aunt and uncle. So I lost my parents in a sense for, some time, for a couple of years, which was really difficult. And that coming at a time when I was a rebellious, preteen and teenager, I think it was really hard on our family. And I tried to capture that dynamic definitely in the novel. And also the language difficulty as well, so.
Right. And another part of your life, which, this is a courtroom it's not at heart a courtroom thriller, but part of the structure is a courtroom thriller, which is, we were very excited when Scott Turow, another master of the courtroom thriller, endorsed it. Angie was drawing on your years as a litigator or a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
And in fact, as her editor, really one of the only things I ever had to do is she would get so into the courtroom scenes, and she wanted to show every single piece of evidence. And it was like, can't you just sort of narrow it down a little bit? But
and maybe get rid of some of the objections. And I'd be like, but then it wouldn't be realistic.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, but I think we found the perfect balance. You'll be the judge, but I think we got it. But what was that like to sort of draw on those skills and just talk a little bit about that? And I think also you have a scene from your book that sort of reflects that too.
Oh, yeah. The opening statement. So I was a trial lawyer for not that long. In fact, I have a number of friends from Williams and Connolly with me scattered throughout. And we actually all sort of disliked it so much. The practice of law, not the law firm, we love the firm, but the practice of law, that we actually made a deal that we were going to leave at the same time, and whoever was the last one left would have to buy everybody else dinner. And so we did that after not that long. But in any case, but I loved actually being in the courtroom, and my favorite part was questioning hostile witnesses, especially, and trying to trap them, and using charts and stuff to try to illustrate a certain point and things like that. So it was really fun, but unfortunately, that's like 5% of the practice of law. And then the rest of it I really hated. So sadly, I had to leave. But when I started writing, what was cool was that when I started writing the courtroom scenes, I no longer sort of agonized over word choice and rhythm of the prose and things like that I did for the rest of the writing. And instead, I sort of like took off my writer hat and put on my author hat, my lawyer hat. And as a lawyer, I didn't care that much about writing. So it was really easy. And I was able to just sort of write and write and write, which is why you had to do so much editing on those scenes. But it was really, really fun. And I'll read just the opening statement of the prosecutor, whose name is Abe, just so you can get a flavor of what the trial is about. So this is Abe, the prosecutor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Abraham Patterly. I am the prosecutor. I represent the Commonwealth of Virginia against the defendant, Elizabeth Ward. Abe pointed his right index finger at Elizabeth, and she startled as if she hadn't known that she was the accused. Matt stared at Abe's index finger, wondered what Abe would do if he, like Matt himself, lost it. Right before the amputation, the surgeon had said, "Thank God your career's not too affected by it. Imagine being a pianist or a surgeon." Matt had thought about that a lot. What job could one have and not be too affected by amputation of the right index and middle fingers? He would have put lawyers in the category of not too affected, but now, looking at Elizabeth withering under Abe's simple gesture of pointing at her, the power that finger gave Abe, he wasn't sure. Why is Elizabeth Ward here today? You've already heard the charges: arson, battery, attempted murder. Abe stared at Elizabeth before turning his body square to the jury box. Murder. The victims sit here ready and eager to tell you what happened to them. Abe motioned to the front row, and to the defendant's two ultimate victims, Kit Kozlowski, the defendant's longtime friend, and Henry Ward, the defendant's own 8-year-old son, who can't tell you themselves because they are dead. Miracle Submarine's oxygen tank exploded at about 8:25 p.m. on August 26, 2008, starting an uncontrollable fire. 6 people were inside, 3 in the immediate area. 2 died, 4 severely injured, hospitalized for months, paralyzed, limbs amputated. The defendant was supposed to be inside with her son, but she wasn't. She told everyone she was sick. Headache, congestion, the works. She asked Kit, the mother of another patient, to watch Henry while she rested. She took wine she'd packed to the creek nearby. She smoked a cigarette of the same type and brand that started the fire, using the same type and brand of matches that started the fire. Abe looked at the jurors. All of what I just told you is undisputed. Abe closed his mouth and paused for emphasis. Undisputed, he said, enunciating it like 4 separate words. The defendant here, he pointed that index finger again at her, admits all this, that she intentionally stayed outside, faking an illness, and when her friend and son were being incinerated inside, she was sipping wine, smoking using the same match and cigarette used to set the blast, and listening to Beyonce on her iPod.
Now, the Elizabeth who's on trial is a single mother of an autistic boy, and a lot of the heart of this book is about parents of kids with special needs kids, and also the struggles of single mothers. And to me, it's an extremely it's treated with nuance and thoughtfulness and surprise. It's not at all knee-jerk, or you don't exactly know where it's going to go. And I know, Angie, that you were very concerned. I mean, we all were a little bit concerned about how the book was going to be read by the community of parents with special needs kids. And we've already begun hearing from, very moving and positive way from some of those parents. But maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
So, absolutely, my favorite part about publishing has been hearing from readers. And whether it be on reviews or I've gotten a lot of emails and messages through social media and things like that. And I was worried a little bit about how it would be received, because that one of the, it's not a message per se, and it's certainly not a message that I tried to give, but that's sort of how the story came out, is fighting against this myth of the good mother, the saintly mother who is perfect, who at every moment of every day loves every single aspect of being a mother. And I think that is such a harmful thing for mothers. Okay, see, look at my kids. Like, they're all like screwing up their faces, and they're like, "That's not my mom at all." So, and I think that that's such a harmful message to parents in general to send, because then it makes it difficult for people to talk about the more difficult challenges of parenting, and especially when there are challenges that are chronic, that are sort of day after day, and the days change into weeks and months and years. And I have, experience with some of that with my kids. One of my kids was born deaf in one ear. Another one has life-threatening allergies and doesn't necessarily bring his EpiPen wherever he goes, which is very concerning. Another one we thought had some serious medical problems, because his head circumference was very, very small, alarmingly so. And then it just turned out, like, after much testing, like 8 years of testing, that he just has a small head, which apparently I do as well. And I apparently have a small pointy head, just like he does. And so we've just gone through so much. And I think that I tried to sort of be brutally honest at times about the challenges of that. And I'm having these characters sort of talk to each other and be very intimate with each other. And this HBOT chamber that I told you guys about is something that I experienced with one of my kids as well. And the thing that I loved about that environment, and why I chose it as a setting for a lot of the novel, is that when you are sealed inside, there's no escape. So it is a crucible, and it's a crucible in a physical sense, and it's a crucible in an emotional sense as well. And when you are inside and it's darkened, and there's really nothing you can do, there's no electronics or anything like that because of the fear of fire with the oxygen, it becomes like a confessional. You are sealed inside, it's darkened, there's really nothing to do but talk to each other. And it's mostly the same families day after day. And so you share intimacies and secrets, and you talk about what it's like, and you do a little compare and contrasting of your kids and your journeys and things like that. And what's been wonderful is that some of those intimate conversations that I tried to portray in the novel, some of which can have some brutal thoughts that the characters might have from time to time in a fleeting way that nobody would ever act on, but that, well, possibly except for the defendant, obviously, but and what's been really heartening is hearing from people who are either have chronic issues, whether it be, chronic Crohn's disease, or who are on the autism spectrum themselves, or parents of people with those issues. And hearing that it was so heartening to read the book because even though it's fictional characters in a book, it helped them to feel like they weren't monsters for having some of the same thoughts that the characters have had. So that's been really just the most amazing thing for me as the writer of this book to just hear that from people.
Do you want to read the section about the H-spot, or do you want to do the other one?
Maybe the
Immigrants?
immigrant one,
Yeah.
yeah, because so one thing that it's so funny because I was thinking to myself, I'm working on my second novel, which my agent is very happy about, but that one has autism in it too, and I was really trying to figure out, and this was like a couple months ago, and I was writing an essay which I'm still sort of stuck on, but about sort of why I'm so drawn to the issue of autism. And it dawned on me, you know what, I'm going to read it and then I'll discuss it because I think it's actually a tie between sort of being an immigrant who doesn't speak the language. And, okay, so this is from Pak's point of view, and Pak is the father of the immigrant family. Pak Yoo was a different person in English than in Korean. In a way, he supposed it was inevitable for immigrants to become child versions of themselves, stripped of their verbal fluency, and with it, a layer of their competence and maturity. Before moving to America, he'd prepared himself for the difficulties he knew he'd experience, the logistical awkwardness of translating his thoughts before speaking, the intellectual taxation of figuring out words from context, the physical challenge of shaping his tongue into unfamiliar positions to make sounds that didn't exist in Korean. But what he didn't know, hadn't known, hadn't expected was that this linguistic uncertainty would extend beyond speech and, like a virus, infect other parts, his thinking, demeanor, his very personality itself. In Korean, he was an authoritative man, educated and worthy of respect. In English, he was a deaf-mute idiot, unsure, nervous, and inept. Pabo. This was the thing he regretted most about their move to America, the shame of becoming less proficient, less adult than his own child. He'd expected this to happen eventually, had seen how children and parents switch places as the parents age, their minds and bodies reverting to childhood, then infancy, then non-being. But not for many years, and certainly not yet when Mary still had a foot in childhood. In Korea, he had been the teacher. But after his move, when he visited Mary's school, her principal had said, "Welcome, tell me, how are you liking Baltimore?" Pak smiled, nodded, and was deciding how to answer. Perhaps the smile nod had been enough. When Mary said, "He loves it here, running the store right by Inner Harbor. Right, Dad?" The rest of the meeting, Mary continued speaking for him, answering questions directed his way, like a mother with her 2-year-old son.
In a minute, we're going to take your questions. So if the cards can come to Susan. And so I'll ask you one question as Susan looks at them. So when and where did you get the idea to write this book?
Okay, let me
you
just.
wanted
Oh
to
yeah. I wanted to. So this,
Sorry.
this was my
The
like
autism
epiphany.
connection.
Yeah, this was my epiphany. So I was thinking about that and sort of how, and I was talking about immigrating, from Seoul to Baltimore, and when I was 11, and not speaking the language, which the father expresses here a little bit. But what's interesting about that was that how much of my self-confidence was stripped away by not speaking the language. And I think it's interesting, and I think it's something that I didn't really expect, because there's a reason. It's not that I wasn't intelligent for not speaking it. It's not that my parents are not intelligent for having accents or not, getting the grammar completely right or the syntax or whatever. And everybody would understand sort of intellectually why we don't why we have difficulty speaking in English. And the reason is that that's not our first language. We are fluent in in our own language or whatever. And yet, even knowing that, when you see someone struggling to speak, when you see somebody struggling to find the correct grammar, somehow you just start thinking of them as not very smart. And, and then you as the speaker feel that way too. There's a shame in it. There's an embarrassment and a feeling like I'm inferior, even though you know that there's a perfectly good reason. So it's just sort of this irrational thing. And the connection to autism, I think, is that especially the children on the autism spectrum who are nonverbal, whenever I see their struggle and then I hear stories about how they, using special techniques and technologies and things like that, are able to actually express themselves, and then you realize, oh my goodness, they had all these thoughts within them, and we were just treating them as if they didn't, but they actually do. It just brings me back to that time when I was 11 and I came here and I didn't understand anything that was being said to me. I couldn't speak it, and I could see in the eyes of everybody who was looking at me like, oh, this poor kid, she's so stupid, and it just sort of devastates me thinking about that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to autism as a particular thing.
I'm very glad you went back to that.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Susan, why don't you start?
Okay, great. Yeah, we've got a number of really good questions here.
Oh, and please feel free to ask a couple of questions that are sort of more publishing oriented, because I would be happy to hear these two talk too.
Susan, hold it really high.
Closer? Okay. So this is from someone who said, you and I met as new mothers of very young children. And I think just on the cusp of real brutal honesty about motherhood. How do you think raising children is different these days in the age of mommy blogs, mom memes, etc., than it was then? And how is it the same?
I think it's the same in that it's been hard and it's still hard. And, there's just so much that's difficult about it and challenging about it. And I think, in a way, the difference between sort of our parents, when we were kids versus now is that this parenting has become this thing that we do that's become sort of competitive and the kind of thing that is supposed to sort of bring us so much joy. And not that it doesn't, but it's sort of supposed to be something that you are supposed to focus on and be joyful about at every moment of every day. And I think that just puts a lot of pressure on mothers, especially. Not to say that, fathers aren't, because my husband who's back there, honey, you have a seat back here, up here. But anyway, but I think that, mothers especially have the societal pressure of feeling like that we need to make this into our job, and in order to do a good job and in order to be a good mother, our kids do need to get into the best colleges ever, and they do need to make sure and win the science fair with the most beautiful science project and whatever. And so we need to help them and things like that. And again, my kids are laughing, like looking at each other going like, mom never did any of that, because I didn't. But so anyway, I think that's one of the things that makes it really difficult. But hopefully, we can be sort of brutally honest about that and try to sort of dispel this myth of the good mother. So.
And here's a corollary of that question. Okay. Which mother do you identify with the most closely, and why?
In the novel. Oh, that's a really good one. I think so. Elizabeth is the defendant in this murder trial. And I think I identify with her the most because she's a neurotic, type A, completely horrible from time to time, control freak. And I think that my husband, especially, would probably tell you that I tend to be like that, or I can be. No, you wouldn't? Okay. He's being nice to me because, it's my birthday and all.
Oh, we should mention this is Angie's birthday.
Not today, not today.
2 days ago.
Yeah. No, like, I don't know, like sometimes.
It's pretty cool to have your.
It was a week ago. It was a week ago.
It's very cool to have your first novel come out basically on a major birthday. So
Well, we did that intentionally because we were sitting at FSG's offices in April 2018. And we were trying to figure out the best day for the release or whatever, the whole team was like, I think April 2018 would be great, and I was like, 2019, I mean, and I was like, oh, I turned 50 in April 2019, and you immediately were like, what day? And then she pulled out her calendar because. The books are published always on Tuesdays, which I never knew until this year. So she was trying to find the Tuesday that would work best with my birthday. So I thought that was pretty cool of my editor to do. Yeah. What was I say? Oh, I forget what the question was. Oh, but Elizabeth. But I do think that. So Elizabeth in the novel is like a former accountant, and she's at home, and she is just so in love with her child that she just really wants him to just be sort of perfect and quote unquote normal. And I think I identify with that a lot because as an immigrant, again, another connection to the whole immigrant thing, when I came over from Korea, I was the weird kid. I was the kid who didn't know how to dress. And this was 80s. So it was like the preppy handbook, Izod era when we had, like, when everybody went around with those alligator Izod shirts. And at one point, I was feeling like such the weird kid that at one point I took scissors and I took off the Izod alligator from my little cousin's shirt because we were too poor. We couldn't afford them. And so we did that. And then I sewed them onto some like handmade sweater that my mom had given me, which definitely did not make me popular in any way whatsoever. And so I was always like the left out kid, like the who didn't know anything. And I was, and so it was important for me to try to be as normal as possible, whatever that meant. And I think this drive to be normal is something that this mother in this novel really is trying for, not only for herself, but for kids. She just wants her kids to be normal. And, and I think that that's something that I identified with and that I tried to inject into the character.
And here, it seems the characters are keeping a lot of secrets from themselves and others. How important is the theme of keeping secrets in this novel?
I mean, in some ways, from a plot point, it was important because, you want them to keep secrets so that you can have twists and, red herrings and all the fun things that I think mysteries and especially murder mysteries should have. But I do think that thematically, the idea of keeping secrets is very important in these worlds. So in the Korean society, there's, I think, a lot of feeling of sort of shame whenever things aren't exactly sort of the way that they're supposed to be. And so there's a lot of keeping secrets in sort of the Korean culture. And I think that's one of these, so like an illness in the family, especially like a mental illness would be considered something that you just really keep in the family, in the close family, not even the extended family and things like that. And this idea, I think, also extends beyond that to sort of parenting also. Like, this idea of, you have shameful thoughts, so you're actually going to keep them secret from, even your spouse in some instances. And then also, if there are like disabilities or chronic illnesses at issue, I think there are definitely secrets that come into play. So I think that is something that I've thought about a lot, and that is definitely present in the novel, as well as obviously lies, given that the book starts with my husband asked me to lie. And I think that one of the important things that I didn't really try to, I didn't set out to write about that. But one thing that I've been asked a lot in interviews, like over and over again, is about, sort of the sense of morality that's in the novel, and the sense of sort of the importance of being honest even about the things that you think it's not important to be honest about, and exploring that and exploring why that's important. And so, yeah, so all of those.
And the last question is, what were the first English language novels you read, loved, and did you use any novels as models for your own?
Completely. Okay, so I'm going to take that last one first. The models is my own. So Dennis Lehane's Mystic River, I probably listened to that 2 different versions with 2 different audiobook narrators and had it by my side. I don't know how many times, like probably 20 while I was writing this novel. So, and that's one of the reasons why I named the town Miracle Creek, Mystic River, Miracle Creek. So it was sort of a wink, wink homage. And I actually outlined it, and I tried to learn from the way that Dennis Lehane structured the novel. And tried to have plot points around the same times as he did, and things like that. And I had others too. And the other one is Tim O'Brien's In the Lake of the Woods, which is one of my favorites. But some of my Great Falls friends will remember that I actually tried to introduce this to a book club and nobody liked it. So, but Susan, you loved it. Yeah. So anyway, but that is also a mystery, and it's a mystery in which it never really gets solved. One of the things that it's famous for is that there are all these hypotheses chapters of what could have happened to the wife that goes missing in the beginning of the novel. But then you see like 7 different hypotheses of what could have happened, but you have no idea, even at the end, what did happen. And because it's Tim O'Brien, of course, it's about the Vietnam War, and, there's a lot of that at play and things like that. And there's a lot of flashbacks and things. But so those were probably the 2 that I had in front of me the most. As far as my first English language novels, wait, I think this is a plant. Somebody who knows my story, maybe, because so I wrote an essay about. That was in Glamour. Was it Glamour? Yes. About how I learned English by reading Sidney Sheldon novels, which I would not recommend, especially when you're in middle school, because the phrases that you tend to memorize, thinking that they're like, oh, these must be cool phrases, are really not suitable for school. And in fact, I'm not going to say them because my 10-year-old is sitting here in front of me. So anyway, but I really did love Sidney Sheldon because my aunt had a huge Sidney Sheldon collection, and we were also really poor. So I other than going to the library, we didn't really have a lot of books that I could buy and things like that. So I definitely read them, and I love the sense of mystery and things like that. And it was really a fun way to learn, to basically sit there with one book in one hand and the Korean English dictionary in the other hand. And my aunt told me that she learned English by, among other things, writing down words she didn't know on the bookmark. And then when it filled up, then she would just sort of put the book aside and memorize all those words. And then she would get another bookmark, and then she would do the same thing. And my aunt is a very smart woman, and I tried to do the same thing, except that the book, I so didn't know any words. So the bookmark became like, like it would be like one page, and then I would run out of the bookmark. So I had to get a notebook. But other than that, yeah.
Well,
I just wanted.
go. Go.
Oh no, I just wanted to add some things about the book that weren't touched on. The novel is so entertaining. It really can be a beach read if that's how you want to read it. But there are so many themes in the book that I think are very relevant for right now. And not only is it about immigrants, but again, also about people struggling with health issues and health, care crisis in our country. But more than anything, it's really about empathy, and it's about how a community, especially of these mothers who are empathizing with each other. There's also a human. What I loved about Angie's book is it's so honest, so that in the depiction of these people who are searching for friendship, she also is very true to human nature, so that sometimes a little bit of competitiveness crawls into the relationship. And I thought that was just very honest, because while we form bonds with each other and share stories, we can't help but compare ourselves with each other. And so to be able to be honest, to speak truth, these are great themes that I think are very relevant. And she does a brilliant job with it. Doesn't hit you over the head with it. You can enjoy it at the beach and still feel like you're engaging with the culture.
That's too perfect. We should end there. There are books for sale back there. There's Prosecco and dumplings over here. Angie will be signing books over here. And we're really grateful to see such an amazing turnout for this night. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.